Welcome to On the Corner of Main Street, presented by Plaza Hotel and Casino in downtown Las Vegas. Here is Plaza CEO Jonathan Jossel, Gary Vickery, and I'm your host, Lisa Melmed. Today we are joined by casino executive, Gaming Hall of Famer, former Gaming Control Board member, who ended the Chicago Outfits control of Las Vegas, Jeff Silver. Welcome to On the Corner of Main Street.
Wow, that's quite an introduction. Thank you so much.
How cool. How cool to be able to say that. You ended the Chicago Outfits control of Las Vegas. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us, and really appreciate you taking the time. It's an honor to have you here. It's pretty cool to be able to have someone to share these stories. Have you done many podcasts?
I've done a few in my day.
Yeah, people know of your story. People have heard of it. You think it's out there?
Yeah, somewhat, I would say. I mean, I don't every day talk from the tallest building. In fact, I didn't mention anything about organized crime and my relationship with that until the people that I was pursuing ended up dying. So
that's probably smart to keep that to yourself. Low profile. But thank you. And we did have the honor of having you here at one of our Oscars dinner series. When was it? That was like about a year ago, maybe?
Yeah, it was about 6-8 months ago.
Okay.
So tell us first where you're from and how you got started in your law career.
Okay. Well, I grew up here in Las Vegas. My folks moved here when I was 9 years old. And so I went to Clark County schools and Las Vegas High School when it was still downtown.
Okay.
And then I went away to college at Northwestern University.
I don't like asking people this question if you don't mind sharing, but what year was that when you moved here?
It was 1955.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I always like to give a sense to people listening, like what was Las Vegas like back then and what was happening here?
Well, it's really funny how the age kind of creeps up on you, when all of a sudden you're addressing a class of students like at UNLV where I give a lecture periodically. And none of the people in the class were alive or born at the time that I was talking about. So it always gives you a good perspective on history when you've lived it yourself, and you can tell people firsthand stories about what they read about in the textbooks.
Yeah,
definitely.
But I moved here with my folks. My dad was involved with the Stardust Hotel in its construction with a guy named Tony Cornero. And Cornero, my dad didn't realize the background of this guy. He was essentially a business consultant and was advising him on certain of the financial aspects of the construction. But he didn't realize that Cornero was part of the crime family in Los Angeles and ran gaming ships off of Santa Monica. Okay. And had been chased out of the gaming industry and then decided, like many mobsters, to move to Las Vegas where he would be unmolested. Well, while this hotel was being built, the Stardust was supposed to be the largest hotel in the world at the time with 1,000 rooms. And wow. In fact, the Stardust lettering that was so distinctive was actually designed by my mom.
Oh, really?
And
now Lisa's excited.
The neon sign that's at the Neon Museum was designed by your mom?
Yeah, well, it was the kind of space-like lettering that was originally at the hotel.
That's an interesting piece
So
of trivia.
yeah, so my dad.
You really think your dad didn't know Cornero was?
I don't think so. He was introduced to him by his sister.
Okay.
And he was living in California at the time, and she said, "This is an opportunity to meet this dynamic guy named Tony."
Yeah.
And he didn't realize that it was Tony the Hat Cornero.
Hat.
So he came here, and they started construction of the hotel. And Tony the Hat Cornero was a little bit of a character, and he would get money from people as investors, and then he'd put the names of the person's investment and their amount in his hat. Okay. And then it was like one of those stories about the producer where he'd sold over 100% of the subscription for the operation. But he never had to face the music because Tony was an inveterate gambler himself and had been shot a few times during the course of his career, and so he wasn't exactly in the best of health.
Okay.
And so he was rolling dice one night at the Desert Inn Hotel and leaned over the crap table and died of a heart attack right there. And so with his passing,
Wow.
everything and all of the machinations that had been going on with Tony had been put into chaos. And my dad tried to bail things out, but he wasn't able to do that. And we ended up being stuck here. In 1955, my dad went off to do other things, and
He left the industry?
he left the industry.
Sorry, so why'd you look at me when he said he had a heart attack on the crabs table, as if I'm supposed to say, let's change something? Like, what am I supposed to do about that?
No, it's
Well,
a
he must have
wild story.
That's crazy. It's
he must have had
unbelievable.
a very important past that he was looking for, and it didn't come through, and he died of a heart attack.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
Was it on a 7-ale? Is that a bad joke?
not sure about the details, but somebody at the Desert Inn may still be alive that has the story on it.
The ultimate don't pass.
He passed away is what happened. So we ended up getting stuck here.
And your dad left the industry after that?
He did. Yeah, he was in the periphery of the industry for a while. But it was a great disappointment to him, and obviously he wasn't the same afterwards.
Yeah.
He spent a couple of years, like I said, trying to keep things together, but was never able to do that. And so that was his major disappointment.
And then you went off to school right around there?
So, after I graduated from high school, I went to college in Chicago at Northwestern, got a degree in business administration with a major in accounting. Okay. And then came back here and worked for, a major accounting firm. I took and passed the CPA exam, which was amazing to me because I never liked accounting.
Well, that's interesting because I did business administration, but I just thought it was a useless degree. But at least you got yours with accounting.
Yeah,
so I got some specialty. Mine was nothing. I just did business. It was just, what was that?
What was good about accounting is that I knew how to read balance sheets and all of that, but I didn't really like the nature of the business itself. It was frankly got a little boring for me.
Okay.
And so I decided I was going to go apply for law school, and I ended up at the University of San Diego there. And I chose that school mainly because of the fact that the weather is so great in San Diego. I didn't know anything about the school or anything else, but
what year was that?
That was in 1969.
Okay. Yeah, a good friend of mine went to law school in San Diego as well. But is it near downtown?
It's well, there was a couple of them at the time, but this one was overlooking Mission Bay.
Okay.
In the immediate hills right there.
Okay.
And so it was. I had an apartment on the beach and
a surfboard.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Pretty good lifestyle. And the thing is about my accounting actually put me into a good stead because I didn't really have a whole lot of money at the time, and I'd put myself through college too, and I was able to work for the business office at the law school, and they paid me for that and gave me free tuition and free food and so on. And then the university, which was owned by the Archdiocese of San Diego, they were looking for a president of the university. And I said, well, I've got just the guy for this. He's a guy that I used to work for at Northwestern, and he ran the business office over there. And so they asked him to send a resume. He did. He was hired and became the president of University of San Diego. And for that, he awarded me the opportunity to run the student graduate housing and get a free room and board as well. So all this from my accounting degree. So I
it
can't
was
really
useful
say,
to you.
Yeah,
it was very useful to you. Okay, very nice.
So what happened after law school?
After law school, I came back here and was looking for work. I had a job offer in San Diego, but I was out of money. And a guy that I had studied for the bar exam here in Nevada said he went to work for the district attorney's office, and that he thought that there might be a position available over there, the Clark County District Attorney. And that individual was Bob Miller.
Oh, okay.
And so he put in a word for me, and I got hired at the DA's office and started working there as a criminal prosecutor. And I ended up staying there for a little over 3.5 years. I did street crime and some murder cases, and I also was in charge of the white-collar crimes division because I was the only guy, like I said, that could read a balance sheet.
Yeah.
And that put me in the position to do the embezzlement cases.
And then how did you get involved with the Gaming Control Board?
Well, after my 3.5 years at the DA's office, I thought, well, maybe it's time to move on. And I was interviewed by the Jones, Close, and Brown law firm, which was a major law firm here in Las Vegas at the time. Herb Jones was the original founder of that firm, and of course his brother was a lieutenant governor, and he was very well connected politically and so on.
Okay.
And they took me to the Las Vegas Country Club, which has its own background in history.
My favorite place. In
Yeah,
Las Vegas.
exactly. And after they started telling me about the opportunities at the firm, they started talking about this gaming control board job and who was going to be replacing Shannon Bybee, who was the board member that had decided that he was going to leave the position.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got back after the luncheon, I went to a friend of mine who was a district court judge who had recently been appointed by Michael Callahan to the judgeship. And I said, well, how do you get appointed to these jobs? And he says, well, just send a resume to the governor.
Wow.
And so I did, and I sent a resume, and then I got a
Who was the governor?
Michael Callahan.
Okay. Yep.
And so I got a call, and it says, "This is Michael Callahan," and he said, "I got your resume. Do you mind if I check you out?" And I said, "No problem." He says, "I'll get back to you," and so he did. And about 2 weeks later, he called me and he said, I had you checked out with the strike force. Dick Crane from the strike force checked you out, and everything came back fine. I'd like to appoint you to this position if you want it. He said, but you're going to have to come to Carson City because I at least have to say that I've met you before I appoint you.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm in trial right now, but I can come up on Saturday. He says, well, that's fine. And so I flew up on Saturday on Air West and met the governor in the mansion, and at the time the chairman of the Gaming Control Board was in the mansion with him, and they met me and the other board member who had picked me up at the airport, who I thought was just a driver. I didn't know anything about the
other board member was picking you up.
Yeah.
What a crazy time. But I guess I have a couple of questions on that, and it's not every day somebody just gets to say, "Oh, I became a gaming." So as a gaming licensee, that's the position that you have the ultimate respect for, and you go through this vigorous investigation. But you're a guy with zero experience, hasn't even met the governor, and here you are getting that position. Like, how does that? That can't be the way it's still happening.
In the old days, they used to say that you're required to fit certain categories of background and experience in order to sit on the board. While it's still in the statute today, no one ever pays any attention to it. And so one guy had to be administrative.
Okay.
Which was Phil Hannafin at the time, who was the chairman, and he had administrative experience working in other state agencies. And the other board member was Jack Stratton, who was also an administrative type who worked for the state sales tax office originally when the gaming apparatus was first put together.
Yeah.
And the other two positions that they were supposed to cover was accounting and law. And so there I was. I was a former prosecutor, and I was a CPA.
So you had no experience in the gaming industry, though?
None whatsoever.
No knowledge.
Except for your father nearly working.
Well, that's not direct experience.
Well,
but
my experience in the gaming industry was as a busboy at the Sahara Hotel.
Okay.
When you were a lawyer working with embezzlement, did any casinos come through in your law cases there?
There was a few gaming crimes that had some ancillary connection to it, but nothing really where I would have delved into the statutes and the regulations.
Mm-hmm.
So then I guess it begs the question, why did you want that position? And did you have like a stated goal as a result of that position?
I just thought that, and you see it today, it's an important job.
Yeah.
But I thought, here I am in 1975. The gaming people, this was the heartbeat of the state. It was accounting for all of the revenue. It was an important position. Everything surrounded gaming in our state. And Nevada was the only state in the union that had gaming at the time that I was appointed.
Yeah.
So I just thought it was pretty high profile and very important, and it would be a good thing to know about. So that's why I took the job, even though it paid a lot less than I was going to be offered to go to work as.
And was there limited terms? Did you have like?
Yeah, the term was 4-year term.
Okay.
So, and then you could be reappointed by the governor after the term had been completed. So I began work over there, and the desk was clean. There was nothing going on. And my secretary, Rosie McIntyre, who was just an angel and very, very capable, I said to her, gee, this job is pretty easy. I said, there isn't really much to do. And so she said, don't worry. You were the only guy in Las Vegas. Everything is going to happen pretty quickly for you as soon as you get your sea legs a moment and let the industry get used to having to deal with you. And she was absolutely right, because within a week or so, every day there was things going on. I mean, a week before
But you were just 29 years old.
29, right. I'm still the youngest gaming control board member that had ever served in the state of Nevada at that age.
Well, I was 29 when I got my gaming license, so we share a special affinity for 29.
Well, and kudos to you, because obviously, if you're getting a gaming license, you're in a very important position that the state needs to trust, and that's a very young age for you to be in a position to be licensed. So
thank you.
I really that says a lot.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
What was Vegas like in 1975? Did you know that there were all these mobsters and outfits running everything?
Well, this is something that everybody knew who grew up here. And I have to say that a week before I took the job on gaming, Sam Giancana was brutally murdered in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he had ties to Las Vegas. And, you could see that the people there were playing for keeps. This didn't happen in Las Vegas, but there were Las Vegas connections because of the fact that Frank Sinatra was friends with him, and there was a tiff about Frank Sinatra catering to him in at his club in North Lake Tahoe, and all of the things that go with the fact that they were definitely sensitive about the gaming people, or sensitive about the mobsters in the industry.
Some of the feedback we've heard when we've asked this question to others that were here at the time, they sort of said. And you're in a unique position because you were actually on the Gaming Control Board at this time. But they sort of said, look, we knew there was the mob here, but as long as they didn't hurt anybody here, they just turned a blind eye to it and let it be, because they were good people and they were doing good things for the city and the state. Now, the Gaming Control Board obviously took a different approach. But was there this idea of let's turn a blind eye to it for now and let it go?
Well, no, contrarily to that. I mean, it may have been that case before. Michael Callahan was in his second term, and essentially, he said to me, you're going to be faced with a lot of these issues pertaining to organized crime. He just says, I just want you to know, you vote your conscience. You don't have to check with me on anything, and do what's right. We have to clean up this industry.
So was that the first time then that somebody said, let's clean up this industry? Michael Callahan should be then credited with essentially setting a program for cleaning up the industry?
Well, I think he and Grant Sawyer were two stalwarts in that regard. You recall when Grant Sawyer took over, this was 1959 and 1960, the federal government was about ready to tax the gaming out of existence, since we were the only state that had it, and none of the other states looked at us with any kind favor. We were a pariah. And so he was told by John Kennedy, who was just elected president, that the industry was going to be facing some rough road unless they did something to clean up their own act. And so they passed the Gaming Control Act at that time, by 1959, a new set of laws, the two-tiered system of regulation. And Bobby Kennedy was still after the gaming industry and organized crime, and they were going to tax it like 10%, excise tax, but for the fact that Grant Sawyer took the steps that he did, and that gave us an initial reprieve. And so that's actually how McCarran Airport was named after Senator McCarran, because essentially he was the one that stopped the 10% excise tax and made it only apply to sports wagering at the time.
Okay.
So I mean, it was a situation where you had one strong, honorable governor putting the regulations together, and then Michael Callahan saying, we're going to finish the job. We're going to get the rest of these people out of here and legitimize, because he had already had Howard Hughes had come in and bought a number of hotels, and that was his first step in getting the industry's properties away from them.
Did Howard Hughes ever come in front of you on the Gaming Control Board?
No, interestingly enough, he was the only regulator approved applicant that never had to appear. In fact, this was just before I took the board seat. Phil Hannafin and Michael Callahan, and maybe the chair of the commission, I'm not sure, flew to London to meet with Howard Hughes and passed on him over there and approved him.
They flew international to approve a licensee?
Yes.
Just because they...
Well, the argument was that Hughes was too sick to travel.
Right.
But, the fact of the matter is that they accommodated him because he was doing a favor for the state of Nevada by taking some of the properties that had questionable background and putting them in his portfolio.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Very interesting.
Things were done differently then. You asked me the question of whether or not I knew that there was organized crime here, and the fact of the matter is that we did all accept it growing up here. When I would go to school, I remember walking into the English class one morning and this young girl was crying, and I said, "Well, what's the matter, Priscilla?" And she said, "The FBI came in last night and took away my dad."
Oh my gosh.
So they were very active in terms of wiretapping everything.
Who was her dad?
Allard Rowan.
Your memory is unbelievable. You remember Priscilla, all the people. It's unbelievable.
Thanks.
So was there at this time a black book?
Yes.
Who created the black book?
The Black Book was part of the original apparatus of the Gaming Control Act. So
what year was the Gaming Control Act?
1959, 1960.
Okay. And so it was already, you didn't create the Black Book.
No.
But you're a fan of the Black Book?
Well, let's put it this way. I think it's a lot of window dressing, but on the other hand, there were some people that they wanted to send a message to that they were so bad that they were inimical to the reputation of the gaming industry. And some of these original people in there were organized crime guys who tested their appearance in the Black Book, and others were slot cheats and others that were dangerous to the industry.
So I did call Oscar and ask him if he had any questions for you that I could bring into the podcast. And he said, yes, ask Jeff if he's a fan of the Black Book, which you just answered. But if so, why did they then expand the purview of the Black Book to include non-gaming offenses?
Well, I think that overall, you've seen a sensitivity as a licensee, this, to things that are more reputational than they are dangerous to the operation. And the fact is that these gangsters were so powerful that they could command such respect and such deference in these casinos that they just felt having them there at all, their presence inside the casino was going to be inimical to the best interest of the state.
Yeah.
They were allowed to go in and have something in a coffee shop or something like that, but they weren't allowed to go into the casino area proper, and it was a gross misdemeanor.
But that changed because now you cannot go in at all.
Now, because they redefined the premises as being the location wherein or whereon gaming is conducted.
Yeah.
So now it applies to the
okay.
property.
So back then you could go in and have a coffee.
Yep.
But that changed, and now you cannot even enter the premises.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Because Oscar wanted to have somebody be a maitre d' at Oscar's. That's in the Black Book. I said, I don't think it's going to sit too well with my license.
Well, yeah.
He said, it's just the restaurant. I said, yeah, but...
You can see all the recent things that are going on where there's such a concern about, perception.
Yeah.
Whether it be sexual harassment or associational issues that have to do with somebody's background or their relatives. And there's a lot of self-reporting going on because that no one wants to be caught in between on something like that.
So with Oscar, you both were adversaries, especially on the Lefty Rosenthal case, which was depicted in the movie Casino, which I'd love to know your opinion and perspective on that. And then he eventually officiated your wedding.
That's true.
You went from adversaries to officiants.
Let's just say that Oscar is a character, and I've always had a healthy respect for anybody who speaks his mind and does what he says he's going to do. And Oscar has never stood on convention. He has always been out there, and he's a tireless advocate for his clients. And when you look at what an attorney is supposed to be, the tireless representation and the advocacy with him, it's not just a turn off at 5 o'clock. He is like that 100%. I'm looking out right now, and there's a sign that says there is no mob Oscar Goodman.
That was put up last night to get into your head.
No.
No, I'm joking. It's been there for a month now.
Well, and that's really him. So even though he He was very, very strong in terms of objecting to some of the things that I was supposed to do as a regulator. He was always respectful to me because he knew that I was just doing my job, and it probably that aspect probably saved my life. When you really think about it, I wasn't there crusading on principles of being vindictive to other people. I was doing what my job was as a regulator.
I think there's an expression, Lisa. It's not personal. It's just business.
Yeah, it's just business, and that's what it was with me too.
So Lisa brings up a very interesting subject of Rosenthal. Did you ever see his show? Did you ever go on his show?
No, I never. I was the target of his show many times.
It was more of a rhetorical question, but the show was pretty cool in terms of what it did for the city, wasn't it? And it created so much fanfare and excitement.
If you got to see any of the episodes, the description might be, it was so bad it was good. It was campy.
Correct.
And to see this guy, he was wearing a hat because he just had hair plugs put in, and going on and carrying on about his personal vendetta against the gaming authorities. This was after his denial, and there was a little bit of a leg room in there for someone who was an entertainment director to still stay associated with the gaming property.
Yeah. And
that was how he was fitting himself in there as an entertainment director at the Stardust. And of course, his group controlled the Stardust, and Alan Glick supposedly was just there as a nominee.
Right.
So, he had O.J. Simpson on and some of the other luminaries of Las Vegas at the time, and it just goes to show you the power of people who were involved in criminal activities. Even the newspapers were kind of siding with him, with the editorial side being interested in taking on the gaming authorities and criticizing me and criticizing other people who were out there trying to do their jobs.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I think you told me this, but you never heard anyone, and you yourself never called him Lefty. No one ever called him Lefty. No one even knows why he's called Lefty for sure, right?
I mean, just the stories about how he raised his left hand to take the fifth.
Right? It wasn't because he was left-handed. No. It was just he raised his left hand. That was the story you told me. But is it correct? No one would dare call him Lefty to his face?
And still be working at the hotel, no.
Yeah.
So, he was... I told the story, and I'm not sure if you were there when I mentioned it, about how I found all this information about Lefty, that essentially he was going to be an informant for the chairman of the Gaming Control Board, and they had confined his investigation to a local investigation. He was working at one of the sports books, and then decided he was going to open up a major sports book at the Stardust Hotel. And I do credit him with that concept idea. That was his strictly, and it happened after they reduced the federal excise tax on sports wagers from 10% to down to 2%, and made it profitable for them to go ahead and do the books in the hotels. But this individual, this FBI agent, former FBI agent from Florida, just came to see me on something else and asked me what was going on, and I said, well, there's Frank Rosenthal investigation. And he had said that he was he had done some work in Florida, chasing him around. He knew his name very well. And he says, did you get the stuff about Rosenthal being involved in taking the Fifth Amendment in front of the McClellan Senate Committee hearings on bribing college athletes in the 1960s? And I said, no, I hadn't heard anything about that. I'd seen an outline of the investigative summary, and none of that was in there. And so he says, well, I have those transcripts in my garage. He says, I'm going to send them to you. And so, like 10 days later, I get a UPS parcel. They didn't have Federal Express in those days. And there were all these bound transcripts where Lefty's taken the Fifth Amendment and being accused of some very serious things.
Wow.
And so when I read them, I called the head of the investigation section, and I said, well, why wasn't this in our summary? Because I'm just naive. I'm just doing my job. And he says, well, you're going to have to talk to the chairman about that. And so the chairman just said to me, he says, I'm not going to tell you can't go that direction. He said, but, we're going to put it in the summary, and then it's going to be your responsibility to ask questions about it, because later on I found out from a reporter, Mary Jane Morrison, that this informant issue had existed between he and the chairman.
Wow.
And so at the hearing, there was Oscar and all these other people.
So that's the scene in the movie Casino where he gets denied the license.
No. The interesting thing is that the movie scene was like the last licensing, his third time of being investigated and denied.
Okay. Because they make it seem like he never got a fair hearing, obviously.
Yeah, the original licensing hearing happened 2.5 years before the event that they depict in the screen. And of course, Rosenthal was the creative director for the Hollywood show, so he was the one that slanted everything in his direction and made it out to seem like...
Wait, explain. Say that again? Frank Rosenthal
was the creative director
in the movie Casino.
Oh, wow.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, of course it looks so favorable to him. He got a real rough deal. What an unfair hearing that was.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that. But that is depicting you in that third hearing.
No, that was depicting Harry Reid and the commission in the third hearing.
Okay.
Now, in that third hearing, the Gaming Control Board had just had a joint hearing prior to that hearing, and so I participated in that, and he was denied. And then shortly thereafter, we had the hearing in front of Harry Reid and his commission, and that's when Rosenthal just went bananas.
And Oscar was there, of course.
Oscar was there, right?
Wow.
Okay.
What is it like watching the movie Casino for you?
Well, it's an interesting movie, and I enjoy it because there's a lot of Las Vegas people that actually were involved at that time who played parts in it, including Oscar was in there playing himself, but there are a number of other local people that were in the movie, and I enjoyed seeing that. And it's largely, I would say, 90% of it is probably pretty accurate.
Well, how cool. Was it ever scary working with all these
or against
all these organized people? Like, someone tried to murder you. What's that story?
Well, I tried to act as if with a very fatalistic blow that if anybody was going to try and take me out, there wasn't anything I could do about it anyway. So, they tried to impugn my reputation. They tried to get me to resign. That was probably the most telling of their activities. But there were a couple of times that gave me some pause. One had to do with a guy that wanted to talk to me about how they were double invoicing at the Stardust Hotel in order to steal the money, to skim the money and send it back to Chicago. And he said he didn't want to meet me at the office, but he could meet me somewhere else. And I said, well, you're welcome to come to my house on a weekend or something and let me know. So he says, I'll do that. He says, I'll come over on a Saturday and I'll make sure no one's tailing me or anything like that, and I'll come on over. And so he did, and he laid out the scheme for me, and I said, thanked him very much, and he left. And that I was the last person to see him alive.
Well,
they found his car like 10 days later at the airport, and as far as I know, he's not been seen since. And then there was that second instance that you alluded to that had to do with the FBI calling me over to their offices to read a transcript that they had intercepted in Kansas City, where these two guys that were affiliated with organized crime were talking about killing a guy named Silverman, who I assume was me. At the last page of this 10-page transcript, they said, no, we better not do it. It's going to create too much heat.
Wow.
And so the FBI was laughing at me as I was sweating there, all puckered up in their offices reading this thing.
I bet. Sorry, go on.
Did you have a security guard with you after that, or how did
No. I did have a CCW permit, and I carried a firearm with me, but there was no way I was going to be able to do anything other than to perhaps at the last minute say okay, go away.
I won't come after you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Tony the Hat. We mentioned Frank Rosenthal. Are there any of the other characters that you had a particularly interesting history with or experience with?
Well, there were two.
People would be like, wow.
There were two. One was Joe Augusto from the Tropicana Hotel, and of course he was supposedly affiliated with organized crime, and he was continuously going after me for one reason or another. I was involved in the processes of closing the hotel when in fact they wouldn't agree to certain conditions on their license. And then there was a guy named James Tamer, who was associated with the Aladdin Hotel. He was also from the Detroit area. And there was a circumstance in which Tamer, who was also involved in the entertainment processes over there, he was being prosecuted in Michigan for a robbery that he committed in the late 1930s, early 1940s. And apparently they still had the witnesses in this bank robbery that he was involved in, and they wanted to get him convicted of that crime in order to prevent him from qualifying for a license in that jurisdiction. So I did testify against Tamer in Flint, Michigan, and I talked about some of the things that he was involved in Las Vegas. And so that was a kind of a frightening time, because Flint is no place to have fun at, right. Especially given my circumstances.
Right, amazing. Let's so that was that sort of during being a gaming control board member?
Right.
So let's talk about when you moved over to the Riviera. How did that transition happen from gaming control board to working in casinos?
Well, there was a couple, 2 steps at least in between. One was I worked for the Lionel Sawyer law firm first, right after the gaming control board. And the interesting thing about that was that I was offered the position, and in my last meeting on the gaming control board, there was a guy that was up for a restricted license who had a long-term relationship and friendship with Mo Dalitz. And Mo Dalitz was kind of like he was the godfather of a lot of things going on in Las Vegas, good things. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, he was on the Chicago Crime Commission list of being as being a representative of organized crime. And this is what I say, when growing up here, you accepted a lot of these people as being pillars of society. Right. So his attorney said, well, they shouldn't hold the relationship with Mo Dalitz against this applicant because the UNLV has just given him the Man of the Year award for the university for his contributions.
What a place.
Yeah. So the other 2 board members were not convinced, and they were going to go against this applicant because of the relationships. And I kind of tried to bring it back to some perspective that there was nothing wrong with this applicant. It was just the fact that he had this associations that he a lot of people had relationships, and they didn't understand that growing up here, that's how things might exist.
I mean, it's still the same, isn't it? It's a good old boys town.
So I said to those guys, the other 2 board members, I said, well, it's really perhaps a sad state of affairs where a person who's been given the Man of the Year award here in this community would be on a post office wall on some other community. Yeah. So Mo did not like that, and that was the headline in the newspaper when the guy's application was approved. And so he tried to stop me from getting hired by Lionel Sawyer and Collins because he was a client over there, a big client. Mm. And but they hired me anyway. I have to say the integrity of Bob Fess and Grant Sawyer were just impeccable. And so I worked there for about 2.5, 3 years, and then I had this offer to go to work in the industry from the guy that had purchased and was licensed at the Landmark Hotel. And it turned out that even though he was a pillar of society in his own community in Toledo, that he was a bad man too, even though the Gaming Control Board had passed on him. He was stealing money from his brokerage firm, Bell and Beckwith, and had, in fact, taken all the cash that people had deposited with the firm and converted it into his wife's name, and that's what the money that he used to buy the hotel. And so the SEC had gotten wind of this during a routine audit, and he was the one that, in fact, called me at 6 in the morning and said that that I was on my own here in Las Vegas because the FBI was taking him away.
Yeah. And
so that news was unexpected because the hotel wasn't doing very well at the time. I was general counsel. And so I had to run the hotel because no one else is in charge. And fortunately, that weekend we did quite well in the casino, and never looked back because I fired all of his cronies, his wife's cronies that
So
were
you
involved.
got into operations.
Yeah, I got into operations because I was the only one that could be in charge of this place after that, and I fired a lot of what I considered to be sycophants and dead wood, and was able to successfully bring the project around so that the hotel could make money for its first time in its history.
What was downtown like? I mean, you don't mention any of the operators down here, whether it was Jackie Gorn here at the plaza. Did you have any experience with any opinions?
No, I knew them as good operators, but I didn't have any experience.
You never came down here. You never.
I came down here as a kid, to stand in front of the $1 million at the Horseshoe, and that kind of thing. Or I came down here to have a meal, or in my days growing up, I came down here to cruise Fremont Street, and the Fremont Street was a place where this hotel is now was Union Station.
Yeah.
And you could go around the driveway and come back on the other side.
Exactly.
And that was what the kids did on Friday and Saturday nights. We cruised Fremont.
That's unbelievable. And the guys that were down here were all clean, good operators. And
I would say for the most part they were. Because downtown was kind of small potatoes for them, and they didn't feel like, I guess the criminals didn't feel like it was worthy of them to actually try and set up an operation. Although, in the case of the Stardust slots game, the Fremont was a part of their empire, and money that was taken from the slot machines at the Stardust at the Fremont was counted at the Stardust, and that made its way back into Chicago as part of the skim.
Okay, that's interesting. Was the Nugget Bill, was Steve Wynn down here by then, or? Well, I mean, I guess by then I don't know what you're talking about.
I think he was.
Okay.
I think he was. He was in charge of the Golden Nugget at the time, and he had passed muster through the gaming people, and was operating the Golden Nugget.
Okay.
Now, it is a little strange how Steve Wynn got to the Golden Nugget, the money for it. He was awarded a Shenley distributorship as a young man, very young, and used that money and part of the sale of a piece of property that was located next to Caesar's Palace, that was essentially just where the power lines were, and used that money to buy the Golden Nugget, and how he got put in that position, whether it was his acumen and foresight, or whether or not somebody said, here's this guy, we want to make sure he's promoted into a situation where he can make some money for himself.
Oh.
Interesting.
Okay.
We just had Senator Richard O'Brien on the podcast, and in doing research on him, it was a time when he had to remarket Las Vegas and Nevada to change the public perception of what was going on here. And I came across your name in the research of that and the Burger King Revolution. Can you share what that is?
Okay. When I was, like I said, after I left the Landmark, I went to the Riviera, and I was hired by Meshulam Riklis to be the president.
His name was, we talked about him with Freddie Glussman.
Right. He was married to Pia Zadora.
Oh, no. And Larry Ruvo told us about Meshulam Riklis. Exactly, yes.
Yeah, he also had a liquor distributorship.
Okay.
In a company called Rapid America Corporation, and it was a widely held conglomerate. I mean, they had Playtex bras and all kinds of different types of businesses, and he had purchased the Riviera, and had, with his cronies that were involved, had run it into the ground and filed bankruptcy. And so on the first day of filing bankruptcy, he asked me to come over there and run the hotel for him, because I had had this successful run at the Landmark. And so I did, and I started cutting. He left me alone for a while because he wasn't sure how things were going to go. But I cut a lot of expenses, and within 4 or 5 months, I had like $8 million in the bank. Of course, we weren't paying our debt service because of the bankruptcy, but it was a big turnaround for him. And he asked me for some ideas about how he could improve the marketing of the hotel, and I said, well, we're no longer a high roller type of hotel like we used to be, because the other properties had opened up. It was like the Mirage and some of these other places were big ticket items, Caesar's Palace and so on. And so I said, I think we're more of a middle marketplace. And just looking across the street, there was a company store owned McDonald's that was doing land office business, even though it was right next to Circus.
What does that mean, land office?
In other words, there were people waiting outside the door to get in.
Oh, like gangbuster.
Yeah, it was
like
gangbuster.
Good.
Yeah,
Land office.
It's a term from the 49er gold rush days where you would go in and file your assay claim at the land office.
Okay. All right.
And so they were doing quite well. And I said to him, even though they have the plate of plenty at the Circus, which was all you can eat for $1.99, I said, they're still waiting at McDonald's. And I said, we got to do something in our store to create a food court and bring in perhaps Burger King, which is the number 2 burger company. And he took that idea and he talked to Burger King and they agreed. And the end result was the store that that they put into the Riviera was the most successful Burger King in their chain. We did all kinds of business over there, and it was because of the fact that people wanted to have something familiar, a product that they knew, they trusted, and Burger King and McDonald's were the kind of places that middle market people wanted to gravitate to.
That's so interesting. You brought fast food to casinos.
Yeah, I did.
And now nearly every single casino has a fast
Yeah, I don't know if I want to thank you or not, though.
Right.
I don't really want my McDonald's downstairs, but okay, thank you.
Well, after looking at the price of a meal at some of these resorts on the Strip, I mean, you guys are real good here, but to pay $80 for a meal down on the Strip, you're happy to get a McDonald's, or at least to be able to go and get a Egg McMuffin for breakfast as opposed to spending $10 or $15.
Are you still in any way involved in the industry? Are you doing anything today?
Well, I just retired from my law firm in December.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
And it has been pretty good. I didn't realize there was a whole world out there.
just playing golf at the country club?
Well,
what are you doing?
I'm not a golfer at this point, but I do have 3 Shelties, and they take a lot of my time and are pretty demanding. But I also, continue to read and follow the industry, and I still get calls from people asking me, my advice on this, that, and the other. I was in one of the jurisdictions in the Midwest where I have a little house, and they're talking about legalizing gambling there, and there's a possibility of doing some consulting work with them if, in fact, it does transpire.
Unbelievable.
Are you involved in the Mob Museum?
Oh, of course, the Mob Museum. I'm currently the chair of the Mob Museum. And
how could we forget about that?
Yes, and
it was. We knew you were involved in the Mob Museum, but you've been there 3.5 years, or?
No, I've been there since its inception, and they just celebrated their 10th anniversary.
Oh, okay, but have you been? Not always as the chair.
I've been chair for 6 years.
Oh, 6 years. Okay.
Yeah.
Oscar was wrong. Oscar was wrong. He told me 3.5 years.
Yeah, I've served a couple of terms, so
you have to cut. Oscar was wrong because he'll kill me if he hears Oscar.
Yeah, definitely cut that because Oscar was never wrong.
Right.
And the Mob Museum is just an amazing place that I would commend to all of your readers, your listeners, to go look at and spend some time there. We have a very professional executive director, CEO, in Jonathan Ullman, and he has brought this building and its experiences to unbelievable levels, to the point where we are now in the top 20 of the list of all museums in the United States, and that includes all the Smithsonian Institution properties, as being one of the most popular and most entertaining museums to go to.
We had Jonathan on the podcast about a year or so ago, and he was wonderful. And what the museum's become for downtown is wonderful. I mean, we have so many people that come to Oscar's for dinner, that come visit the hotel, and they've all want to know about the museum, or they've been to the museum, and some of them even we have a regular guest from Canada who bought a membership there because they go there so much, even though they don't live here.
Well, let me just tell you, this has not been revealed yet, but maybe by the time this podcast is released, it'll be revealed that the Mob Museum just purchased the adjacent parcel to the east.
Wow.
And we've got some big plans and actually a fundraising drive to do even greater things and more fun things over there on the property.
That is not known to me. That is
very exciting.
Thank you. Thank you for the breaking news.
Breaking news. I have one last question for you, and it is, we usually ask our guests what career advice you would give to somebody starting out, but I more specifically would like to know, maybe from both of you, as 29-year-olds, what advice would you give to someone who doesn't have the experience that you think would qualify you to be doing something? Like, what What was it? What was it? Your confidence? What kind of advice would you give on that?
Well, I mean, there's obviously, three things that don't take drugs, show up on time, and be nice to others, because like people say, you meet people on the way up that, you may find on your way down that you're going to run into the same people. I mean, I say this because Bill Hornbuckle was my hotel manager at the Landmark, and now he's the CEO of MGM Resorts. So, people that you meet, you never know when you're going to see them again. Mm-hmm. But also, I think it has to do with being, treating everybody respectfully and treating everybody well, and not going for the gratification of being the richest guy in the room or the smartest guy in the room. Surround yourself with people who are smarter than you, and don't worry about driving a BMW in your first year as the executive of the hotel. Take everything in moderation and take it easy, and be patient in your life, and the career will happen if you just do those kinds of things.
That's great advice.
I think the only other thing, and you certainly touch on this without the experience, if you don't have the experience and you haven't done things and you haven't failed, or you haven't had somebody tell you how to do things a certain way, which was certainly my experience, my lack of experience, then you're much more open to things, and you can actually be more successful in that position. It's being open to doing things a different way potentially, and not knowing exactly what you want to do.
And Las Vegas is all about innovation. It has reinvented itself many, many times, and it's because of people like you and others who have come here from different places with different experiences and different modalities and ideas that make this town so great. I mean, Steve Wynn did things that Walt Disney did, but had never been done in Las Vegas.
Right.
Well, Jeff Silver, thank you so much for joining us on the corner of Main Street. We really appreciate your time and everything you've done for this great city.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Jonathan and Lisa.
We'll be back again soon, but in the meantime, please rate, review, and subscribe. Tell your friends about On the Corner of Main Street, and of course, follow us on social. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @PlazaPod, and on Facebook, find us at Plaza Podcast. Or go right to the top and tweet Jonathan @Jonathan Jossel. We'll see you next time from right here on the corner of Main Street.
Hey, it's Rich Johnson, the producer of On the Corner of Main Street. If you love this and you want more Vegas, please take a listen to Food and Loathing. Every week, veteran food writer Al Mancini and I, and some co-hosts, dive into the Vegas food scene, one of the best, most diverse, and comprehensive culinary communities in the world. We invite the chefs, owners, journalists, and foodies who make it so to join us. That's Food and Loathing. Available, well, the same way you found this podcast.